Hello, I'm Landon Schlungen, and today we're going to build a 25+5 clock, otherwise known as a Pomodoro clock. And we have to make this project function similar to this one right here, where we can set a session length, or we can set the break length, and then we can play it, and it'll start to count down and time us. And then when it reaches 0, it will make a beeping sound. And then also we can reset it by clicking this button right here. It'll reset. So yeah, on the surface, it looks like a pretty simple project, but it's actually pretty difficult, I would say. And I'm gonna be using React to make this, and also Visual Studio Code. So if you don't have Visual Studio Code, make sure to download it, and then also make sure to get the live server extension once you do get it, because it will help us open up our file in the browser and help make it run. Once you get Visual Studio Code, then we can open up a folder, name it Pomodoro clock or whatever you want. So we'll make our index.html file, and then we'll go exclamation point enter to set up our boilerplate, and we'll call it the Pomodoro clock. Or if you want to, you can call it 25+5 clock. Doesn't matter. And then we want to set up with React for this project, and we also want to use Materialize for the styling. Instead of using Bootstrap, we're going to use Materialize this time. And Materialize is basically Bootstrap, except just a little bit different. So to find Materialize, just look up Materialize. Might as well grab this one first, I guess. Get started. And then here's the CDN right here. So this is what we need. Grab the first one, the link tag. So I'll just copy that, paste it in our head, save it. And then we also want the icons that it comes with. So to find the icons, we go to Components and then Icons. And to use the icons, we need this other link tag. So grab this, paste it in our HTML, and we should be good to go with Materialize icons and Materialize like different components, like their buttons. So now we can use these buttons by adding these classes. Because like I said before, it's just like Bootstrap, except just a little bit differently. So their buttons look a little different and they can do some different things. So yeah, now we want to set up React. So we'll look up React CDN. We'll grab these two script tags right here at the top, paste them in our HTML at the head, save it. We'll grab Babel, do Babel setup in the browser, and then grab this script tag right here, paste it in. And then inside of our actual body, we'll have another script tag for our code, and make sure that it has a type equal to text/Babel to make sure that we're using React. And then I'm going to link to a separate index.js file to work in. And then we also want to have our root div. So we'll do div #root to set up a div with an ID of root that we can inject our React code into. So we'll make our index.js file now. Oh, also want to make sure it's /index.js so that it's the current folder. And we'll do index.js. We'll set up our component called app, and then we'll return a hello world div for now. And then we'll do react dom.render. We'll render the app at that root div. So we'll grab it by doing document.getElementById, and we'll grab the root. And now to see if it's working, I'm going to open this up with live server. So make sure to get that extension, and there we go. There's our hello world that we put in, and we also have the title of Pomodoro clock right here. We are also going to be using a little bit of our custom CSS, so might as well make that CSS file right now. We'll just call it style.css, and we'll link to it right away. So we'll go link, and then the href is /style.css. So now we can style our page with our custom CSS. And now let's get started. So we're going to do most of our work inside of our JavaScript file because we're using React. And basically, to start out here, I want to make this session display right here, the main display for the time. And to do that, we'll go into our div. Actually, let me define some variables first. So our first variable is going to be called our display time, which is going to be that time that's there. And it's going to equal react.useState. It's just like React state, except basically it can just hold one piece of state and call it display time. And it will start at 25 times 60, which would be 25 minutes. And then inside of our div, I want to put an h1 of our display time and see what shows up. Oh, also make sure it's in brackets to indicate JavaScript. So there's our 1500 that we put in here. And we want to format it as time. So to do that, we're going to have a separate function called format time. Const format time equals an arrow function. And it's also going to take in a time parameter. And then we're going to have the minutes equaling math.floor, our time, divided by 60. And then our seconds are going to equal time modulus 60. And then off of this format time, we're going to return basically a string. And this string is going to be minutes. If minutes are less than 10, then we want to have 0 plus our minutes, otherwise just our minutes. And then we want to add a colon. And then we want to do the same thing for seconds. So I'll just copy this and then I'll change minutes to seconds. Save that. And then we want to use this function. So go down into our JavaScript inside of our return tag and we'll do format time and we'll pass in display time. And there we go. Now we have 25 minutes showing up just like that. The next thing I want to work on are these length components where we can set the break length and we can set the session length. And to do that, we're going to set a separate component to do it, to handle it. And this component is going to be called a function of length, and it's going to take in some props. It's going to take in title, change time, type, time, and format time. And then we're going to return some stuff from it. And basically we want to make this part right here, just like one component break length. We want to make that and put it inside this JSX. So it'll start off with a div that will have an h3 and its title. And then we'll have a div of class time sets. So that's going to be our custom CSS class, which is going to have a button of class button small, deep purple, and lighten 2. And basically it's just a cool looking button from Materialize. And it's going to contain an icon from Materialize that has a class name of material icons. And it's going to be the arrow downward. So this is how we do it with Materialize. Save that, see what shows up. Oh, and we're not using length right now, so we have to use it. And this will go above our format time, or before our display time. So we'll have length here as our custom component, and we want to pass in the title, which is going to equal break length for now. We're going to pass in the change time. Right now, we're going to set it to nothing, but it's going to be a function, I'm pretty sure. And then we'll pass in a type equal to break. We'll pass in a time equal to nothing for now. And we'll pass in a format time equal to our function format time and save that. So there's our Materialize button. Oh, arrow downward should be arrow underscore downward. And there we go. Now we can see our arrow. Basically how I know how to do this is I go to Material UI or Materialize, and inside the icons, it kind of shows us how to do it. So right here, we have access to all these icons, and the name of it is right here, and we just say material icons. And then the colors. So right here, I got the deep purple and lighten 2. So I got this color right here, and I put it in right here, deep purple, lighten 2, and that's this color right here. Now we have our one arrow. Now we want to add in the number here, and then we also want to add in another arrow. So underneath our button, we'll add the time by doing an h3 that contains our format time, and we'll pass in our time. And then we'll go underneath that and add another button. So I'll just copy this part down, and instead of arrow downward, we're going to do arrow upward. Save that. There we go. And right now they're not in a row because we need to change this time sets class. So instead of our style.css, we'll do that. We'll define a .time sets that will have a display of grid. It'll have a grid template columns of 50 pixels, 200 pixels, and 50 pixels, and then it'll have a justify items of center and align items of center. Save that, and there we go. Now they're in a row. Of course, the arrows don't do anything right now, but we will fix that. And also the time that we pass into it right now is null. We want to define another variable up here called break time. So const break time, set break time equals a react.useState, and we'll set it to 5 minutes, which would be 5 times 60. And then we'll pass in the break time. Save that. Now it says 5 minutes. Now this change time is null right now, but we actually want to use that inside of our buttons on click. So inside of our button, we'll add an on click handler that will trigger change time. So we'll do an arrow function of change time, and we're going to pass in some parameters to it. The parameter we'll set for the down arrow will be -60 for -60 seconds, and then the type so that we know what we're dealing with. So then when we go up here and we have change time, we're going to set it equal to a function called change time, and that's where we're going to make another function of change time. It equals an arrow function that takes in a amount of change, right, which would be the 60, and it also takes in the type. And then we want to check if the type equals break. So if it equals this string right here, break, and we want to set our break time to be our previous break time minus our amount, or plus our amount actually. So let's save that and see if it works. So if I hit this down arrow, oh, actually we can't see it because it's not being displayed. Oh, actually we can, because it did just go down one. Yeah, but it doesn't go up yet because we have to add that in. So we'll add in this on click there on this button, and it will be plus 60. So instead of the negative sign, just do 60. And there, now that works. Cool. Now we want to add in another one of these for the session links. So we'll grab this and copy it down and basically change all the breaks to session. So it'll be session length, type of session, time will be session time, but we have to define session time yet. So we'll define session time up here, and it will be 25 times 60 to start out with. So there's our session length. And right now clicking the buttons doesn't do anything because we have this if statement. So we want to add an else, set session time to be the previous plus the amount. Save that, and now we should be able to go through that. But we also want to check some other things inside of these. We want to make sure that we can't go below 1. We can't do like negative ones. So we have to check that. So we have to check if our break time is less than or equal to 60 and our amount is less than 0. Then we just want to return and we don't want to do anything. And we want to check the same thing for the session. So we'll go if session time is less than or equal to 60 and amount's less than 0, then just do nothing and return. So now we can't go below 1. Right here I'm clicking this and it's not going below. And then also in the session part, so this else statement, underneath we want to check if the timer is on, which is another variable that we need to declare, or if the timer is not on, then we want to set our display time to be equal to our session time plus our amount. So I'll set up another variable of timer on, and set timer on equals react.useState, and we'll set it to false for now for default. And there, now when we click session length, it also updates our display length like it does in this one. So that's working cool. Now we might as well give this a title. We'll do an h1 of Pomodoro clock, and we'll also do a div of dual container, and we want to put this around our lengths. So there we go. We also want to give our main div a class of center align, which is a Materialize class that centers our text. So now all we have to do is fix our dual container. So that will be our custom CSS. We'll grab our dual container and we'll set a display of grid on it. Grid template columns of 1FR, 1FR. We'll set our width to be 1200 pixels. We'll set the margin to be auto so that it centers. We'll set justify items to be center and also align items to be center. Save that. The other one doesn't show up really because it's 1300 pixels. But if I make it bigger, then it shows up nice. I suppose I could make the width a little less, like 900, and there it shows up a little bit better. Yeah, we might as well make it like 700 for now. And there we go. We have our break length and our session length that we can change. Now we want to be able to start the timer with a play button, and we also want to be able to reset it with a reset button. But before we do that, I want to make the background color like a dark gray. So we'll grab our body, we'll do color of white and a background color of 333. Oh, it'll not dot body, just the body. There we go. Looks a little better. Now let's make our 2 buttons that we need. So underneath our H1 here, we're going to do a button of class button large, deep purple, and lighten 2. And we're gonna see if the timer is on, and if it is on, then we want an icon of pause circle filled. So we'll grab material icon, and it will say pause circle filled. Otherwise, if the timer isn't on, then we want to show a play button. So I'll just copy this down, and instead of pause circle filled, it will say play circle filled. And right now it just says words because my material icon actually has to be material icons. And there we go, now we have a play button because our timer is not on right now, so it's doing the play circle filled. But we want to make it so that when we click on it, then it changes to be a pausing button, and when we click on it again, then it'll be a play button again. So to handle that, we will add an on-click handler to this button, and the on-click will call a function called control time. So we'll define this function up here, const control time equals an arrow function, and then we also want to make our reset button. So we'll do button. It'll have like the same classes as this one. So I'll just copy these down, and this one will have an icon called auto renew. Save that. There's our auto renew icon, which is like 2 arrows spinning. And then when we click this button, we want to call a reset time function. So we'll go on click equals reset time, and we'll define that function up here. It'll be reset time. And our reset time function is pretty simple. All we want to do is to set display time to be its default, which we set up here already to be 25 times 60. We want to set our break time back to 5 minutes, which will be 5 times 60. And then we also want to set our session time back to 25 minutes as well. So that's pretty simple. If I change these and I reset, then it goes back to normal. Now our control time function is going to be a little bit more complicated because this will actually start the timer. And first of all, I want to set up some variables. So I'll say let second equal 1000 because 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. And then I want to set a date so that it's an accurate timer. So our date's going to equal new date dot get time. So this will get the current date in seconds. It'll be like a really big number, but like, yeah, it keeps track of the time that it is. And I want to set our next date equal to our new date dot get time, except this one will be plus our second. And then I'll have this variable called let on break variable equal on break, which we haven't defined yet. On break is going to be a use state hook. So const on break, set on break, and this will equal react.useState, and by default it will be false because we're not on break yet. We're doing the session first. Now I want to check if our timer is on or if our timer is not on. Then I want to set an interval. So we'll do let interval equal set interval, and this takes an arrow function and the amount of time you want before it does the function again. So we'll do an arrow function for the first argument, and the second argument will be 30 because we want to update it every 30 milliseconds. Basically, in this set interval, we want to have our date equal to new date.getTime, and then we want to check if our date is greater than our next date. Then we want to set our display time to be 1 lower. So we'll go set display time, and we'll take our previous display time and we'll do a function on it, and we'll return previous -1. And then also in the set interval below the if statement, we're going to do next date plus equals a second. Or actually this is inside of our if statement. So inside of our if statement, we'll do next date plus equals second to set our next date to be 1 second in the future. And let's see if this works. If I hit play, then it starts counting down. So that's cool, although we can't pause it just yet. Now also in this control time function, where you want to make sure that we set our time to be on, or set our timer on to be true. So we'll do that at the end of this interval type thing. We'll do set timer on to be the opposite of timer on. So if it's true, then it's false. If it's false, then turn it to true. And then also inside this if statement here, the timer on if statement, we want to do local storage dot set item, and we want to set our interval ID. This is so that we can clear the interval, and we want to set it to the interval. So this interval variable right here, we want to pass into local storage to store it for us as a global variable kind of. And before that, we'll clear everything from it so that we know that it's clean. And then we want to check if our timer is on. Then we want to clear our interval. So this is how we actually make the timer pause. So we'll do clear interval, and we'll grab the interval ID. So now I think I should be able to play and pause it. And you see that it changes to a pause button now. And when I pause, then it stops. So that looks like it's working now, which is great. Now, when it gets down to 0, we want it to auto transition to be the break. And we also want it to play sound. And basically, to get sounds to work on this, we first need to get an MP3 file of the sound that we want. So in my case, I might go to YouTube and look up a beep sound effect. Yeah, I guess we'll use this one, whatever. And there's MP3 converters on the internet, so we'll do YouTube to MP3. And then now once we have our MP3 audio sound effect, we'll rename it to break time or something. And then we want to put it inside of our file structure. So I'll just put it right into Visual Studio Code inside of our Pomodoro clock folder. Now we have this MP3 file. And now basically to get that audio file, all we have to do is have a variable called break audio, and it'll equal a react.useState that will by default be a new audio that will be our break time file. So there we go. Our break audio is now a new audio of our current folder breaktime.mp3, which is this one right here. And to play it, we basically call break audio and do stuff to it. So I might as well define that function right now. It'll be const play break sound, which will be an arrow function that does break audio dot current time, and it'll be set to 0, and we'll do break audio dot play, which will actually play the sound. And then if we want to stop it earlier, we can do a set timeout on it, but this one is only 2 seconds, so I think it's fine. So now we want to check if our display length is 0, then we want to play our break sound and then transition into using the break length. So to do this, back inside of our control time function, you see we aren't using this on break variable right now, but we will be now shortly. And basically inside this set display time function, we want to check if our previous length is less than 0 or equal to 0. So we want to check if previous is less than or equal to 0 and our on break variable is false. So if we're not on break, then we want to set on break to be true. We want to play our break sound. We want to set our on break variable to be true as well, and we want to return our break time. So that display time now equals our break time that we set, which is the 5 minutes. So basically once it goes down to 0, then it will reset back to 5 minutes. Else if our previous is less than or equal to 0 and we are on break already, then we kind of want to do the same things here. We'll do play break sound. We'll set on break variable to be false for both of these, and instead of returning break time, we'll return session time. And then basically if it passes both of those tests, then we'll just decrement by 1. Now we want a title up here to say if it's a break or it's a session. So we want to check our display time, and right above that we want an H3, and we want to check if we're on break, then we want to display a break. Otherwise, if we're not on break, then we want to display session. Save that, and we'll see that this is the session right now. So we'll check if the beep is working by setting our default down to a really small number. So we'll set this to 5, we'll set this to 3 seconds, we'll set this to 5 seconds, save it, and then we'll see if this is working. So when I play this and it hits 0, it should play a beep sound, and it should transition into the break. So that's a beep, and it transitioned to break, and then it should transition to session and beep again, which it looks like it's doing. So it looks like it's working, which is fantastic. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll set it back to what it was, Command Z to undo, save it, and yeah, here's our Pomodoro clock. It works pretty well. Basically the biggest challenge for me on this one was trying to find what the display time was. I was getting pretty frustrated with that because whenever I checked the display time, it was not what I was expecting. So then I had to actually go into this set display time function and check stuff there instead. So that's why this is all weird like this. But yeah, even though some of this code is a little bit weird and hard to wrap our mind around, I still think it's better than the FreeCodeCamp one. So if we look into this FreeCodeCamp one, we can see that it is almost 300 lines long, and their accurate interval function, this accurate interval function is really, really confusing. Like I barely know what's going on. They have this set timeout where they call the wrapper function, which is this function right here. And yeah, just super confusing. And then they return a function that they pass in. And I didn't really want to do that, so I made my own way of doing it. My code is 140 lines long, so it's about half that of the FreeCodeCamp one. Of course, it doesn't really pass any of the tests because I didn't follow that, but hopefully you were able to follow along. And that's all I've got for today. Made this Pomodoro clock. So just to recap, we set up with React and we set up with Materialize with their icons and their actual library. And then we were able to make this display time where we would format the time. Format the time by doing this, have our minutes and our seconds, and then if it's less than 10, then add a 0 in front. And then we added our length component, which we passed in some props and was able to make some buttons for it that would change the amount of time that we have for each of those. And then we were able to make this play button work by when we clicking it, we set an interval that takes in a date, which is the accurate time. Because if it would be just a regular interval, then the 1000, it would like lag behind, and it's not very accurate. So this is why we do it like this. And we check every 30 milliseconds. We check if the date is greater than the next date that we had set. And if it is, then we want to decrement this counter by 1. And then we also check once it hits 0 to switch to break. And if it is already on break, then to switch to session, and also play our beep sound by having a new audio, and then we call play on it. And yeah, let's see what we have up next with FreeCodeCamp. Up next, we have our data visualization certificate, and we'll do our data visualization with D3. And D3 is a library for making charts and stuff. So that should be fun to go through these challenges, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.